Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the quest for the bestest. I'm Timo, joined, of course, by my four great co-hosts, and today we are talking about My Fair Lady from 1964. It's a great, excellent musical, so long and so entirely fantastical. I can't wait to talk about it, but first, we've got to go a little bit back to yesteryear, go back to last week, and discuss what film we talked about. Oh, that's right, it was Birdman, and oh my god, we put it at an incredible place. Second, I can't keep it up.
Second place. Can you believe it? Second place. What an incredible film. We really enjoyed it. That's a great review that we did last week. And I'm sure we have some great comments on it, don't we, fellas?
We do. I would like to thank both Winston Churchill and Crocodile Dundee for joining us for that intro.
It was so Australian the whole time.
So last week we did Birdman. Birdman goes at place number 2. So I'm your host, Timo Nelson, here to do the housekeeping, and today we're going to read a featured comment. This comes from actually a new Quest viewer, as far as I know, but I also never read the comments, so maybe they've been here every week. This comes from Nameless Anonymous, who says, I watched the film for the first time so that I can be prepared for this video. And I have to say, this is an typo. Be careful, folks. Be careful.
Uh-oh. Your typos will be read on air.
You want to run these through spell check.
This is an enchanting film with novel ideas and an amazing cast. Love Edward Norton. Lol. 9.5 out of 10 for me. Now let's see what you guys have to say. Haha, can't wait. I like this comment for a number of reasons. The ending suggests that they were commenting before they watched the video, and I find that quite compelling. Play a little game with yourself. How do the scores line up? And Mr. Anonymous, you were very close. So thank you for commenting. Be careful with the spell check, but I'll allow it just this once for your first comment.
I'd like people to get, I'd like to merge a school of commenters here. I want the people who hate our opinions to merge with the people who comment before watching the video. I just want those people to just really converge and just hate on our opinions before we even give them.
That sounds like most YouTube comments, yeah.
That Venn diagram is close to a circle.
Oh, I see. Interesting.
Okay, mates. We got to talk about this movie, My Fair Lady. Let's, all horrible accents aside, horrible accents being the primary motivator of this entire film, which may be being the primary motivator of this episode. What do you guys think of it?
Who's going first here?
I'll go first. Actually, Tucker, you go first. You've seen this movie more times. Go right ahead.
Yeah, more times than anyone else here because I'd seen it before. My Fair Lady is an interesting film because it's a film that I really like. I think this is a great film on basically every metric for me personally, but I don't think it's a very good Best Picture winner. I think it slips a little bit under the radar, but man, excellent performances, excellent songs, excellent production design, costumes, lighting, everything is fantastic. But it does dip a little bit at the end, so I can't say it's one of the Best Picture winners, but it's certainly one of my top favorite musicals for sure.
Yes. I'd like to go next because I feel like we'll be on a decreasing gradient of our appreciation of this film. Just a vibe I'm getting. But I also quite enjoyed My Fair Lady. I think Tucker said a lot of truths there that I hold true in my heart.
That was actually like 5 truths and a lie. One of those wasn't true.
A truth.
I like the performances in this. I think this is genuinely a quite a funny movie that sustains its comedy over nearly 3 hours of film. Tucker mentioned the ending there, which is a large sticking point in my mind. For retroactively like looking back on what the film is saying, which I'm sure we'll get into. But yeah, the songs are also really catchy and fun. Even like the more somber, downtrodden ones that I'm usually not a fan of in musicals are quite good. So yeah, overall enjoyed My Fair Lady.
Okay, and to follow, I think I want to go next, just so we can have a nice. The order of us going is a nice little circle around in our...
I haven't said anything yet. Maybe I love this movie.
Maybe he loves it.
Well, who knows? Well, I'm kind of whelmed by My Fair Lady. We've seen some not so good musicals, and we've seen some good musicals. And to me, this one fits kind of right in the middle because I agree, the costumes, I think for a large part, the performances, maybe not the singing, but that's okay, whatever. I'm no big judge on that. The cinematography, there's a lot to like of this film, and yet I was just kind of like super unfeeling the whole time. I don't like what this film is saying, about women, and I think we've got some really ludicrous characters that are not like reconciled. The film doesn't really like try to deal with them at all. But I mean, I like Audrey Hepburn. She's great. So there's that, I guess. I'm just kind of like meh on it, really.
I think well, so. Here's the thing. I enjoyed the movie in part. I would say. Sure. I think that there is a really great 90 minutes to 2 hours version of My Fair Lady.
Yeah.
I think that this movie is so verbose for a film that, frankly, in my opinion, doesn't have a whole lot to do with its runtime. And while I really like a lot of the songs, I feel like they all basically have a verse too many. I think that a lot of dialogue sequences are incredibly circuitous in a way that maybe an editor could have driven us somewhere a little bit more directly. And because of that, I found myself enjoying, as you guys are saying, the performances, the sort of, there's like a theatrical quality to this that I really like. So I agree with Timo, there are elements here, but I found that this began to really drag for me when it became clear that, as Timo was saying, that I think that word unreconciled is important here, because it became clear that we're just going to kind of diverge, and it didn't really matter what was going to happen. Who cares about the dad? Why is he even in there? He's got like a couple interesting scenes, but I feel like the messaging for this movie is kind of weird. I just left uninterested, I suppose, and I had completely clocked out by the time the film was ending. Which is probably not great, because they really try to spool a lot into those last couple minutes. Because I checked that my little bar on Netflix. I'm like, oh god, there's 4 minutes left, and we're singing Higgins is singing a song about love here. How is this going to wrap up? And then it wraps with a Warner Brothers The End card, and things happen there in those last 180 seconds. But yeah, I think the movie's really uneven, frankly.
I think one of my favorite things about this movie, and why on a repeat watch I was pretty much at a big smile on my face for the vast majority of the runtime, as I do want to get into, and the reason I would say this is not a great Best Picture, I do think that there is quite a bit of drag as you get to the end, but for that first 2/3, I think this is almost a flawless movie in my opinion. I think it's where it doesn't tie up its ends that you're like, wait, what the fuck was this all setting up? But when you are getting introduced to Eliza, you're getting introduced to Henry Higgins, you're getting introduced to their concept together, and working through their process of him teaching her how to speak, all of these musical numbers, really drinking in the sets and the production design and all of that. I think this is a very consistent movie for most of its runtime. I found myself laughing so much at this movie because, unlike a lot of movies of this era, it feels like a parody in a self-aware way. There's such an acute sense of humor through all of the dialogue and the lyrics, especially in the songs here, that everything just felt so funny to me. And you're looking at these characters and they're saying these ridiculous things, but the film recognizes its own ludicrosity and it shines a light on that. And I think that makes this film really stand out from a lot of the older musicals that end up feeling quite similar tonally. And while this film falls into those trappings at the end, it has such a spark of humor to it and self-awareness that lots of older films completely lack.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree, Tucker. I think that Rex Harrison's Higgins is a great hateable character, just for the fact that the actor recognizes, the script recognizes, everything in this film recognizes the fact that he is a horrible misogynist character, and he is cartoonish in that fact. He is cartoonishly...
His opening number is like, I hate women. That's how he starts it off.
Well, yeah, well, he has multiple numbers about how he hates women and how women should be more like men. And his opening number is like, why can't the English speak properly with how I want them to speak and everything? Just this like narcissistic, snooty British academiac. That is putting himself above every single person in this film, and yet, because this is my biggest issue with the film, and yet the film decides, or I guess the musical likely also ends this way with. So Higgins, he eventually pushes Eliza away. You've seen the movie. You've all seen the movie. Everyone in the audience has seen the movie. Why not? He eventually pushes Eliza away, and he's sort of like mourning this loss. He's like, oh man, maybe I shouldn't be an asshole to everyone that I meet and treat them like dirt. Maybe that's a bad thing to do. and then he sits down in his house and he's all dejected, and then Eliza comes in and he hits her with a, "Hey Eliza, why don't you go get my slippers?" And then dun 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 dun, the end. Like, what is this? Isn't this character supposed to learn a lesson? Isn't Eliza supposed to strike out on her own and leave this guy who misused her and abused her behind and go live with Freddie, a guy who actually appreciates her for who she is? No, we're just gonna go with Higgins and Eliza. Boy, they're best buddies, or maybe there's a romantic interest there. What is going on with the ending of this film is my question.
I don't
agree
know.
with
I
you.
don't know. Yeah.
It is very peculiar, and I think the reason why it's so peculiar is there's like 5 different ways that this could have easily been written differently, where no matter which way it went, it would have been more satisfying. I think maybe you cut off his last musical number in that last tiny sequence, and it's just Eliza saying, "Hey, I don't need you anymore. I can be on myself. I can find love on my own. You've given me this ability, but finally I've come into myself." Because I do think that her progression to being confident is one of the most satisfying character development parts of this movie, and is certainly what the film is centered around. But I think you end it there. You don't go back to Henry Higgins. Fine, great. She's confident.
Yeah.
She's on her own. Perfect. That's a great ending. Or, and I hate to say this because I do think this movie is too long. You had another 30 minutes on the end where he has to reconcile the fact that he's falling in love with her, and that his love sort of comes with exposure and someone pushing back against him, and no one's ever done that before. There is a story in there that could have been pretty, I wouldn't say easily told, but told on the end of that does wrap it up in a more compelling way. And both of these options are not particularly complex and kind of feel like that's where the movie's headed, but they stick a doorstop in the progression of the film in a place that it doesn't land on either side.
Well, here's the way I feel about it, because frankly, going into the film not knowing its plot or its character arcs or anything, I knew pretty much as soon as they set up the bet that, now I'm basically watching a romantic comedy and they are going to get together in the end. And I did interpret the end to be there'd be a sort of romantic feeling between them.
Absolutely.
But my problem with it is that I don't know what the film is trying to say by ending that way.
It undercuts its own themes.
Right,
Yeah.
because in the scene before, I think the sort of facade of Higgins starts to fall away a little bit, where he basically becomes like a dumb man-child who seems like he's using this misogyny to cover up the fact that he's like emotionally incapable of connecting to a woman or something.
Absolutely,
and
100%.
Yeah, and his mom seems to recognize this because she's the last one in the room there. She's like, "Yes, nice job, Eliza," when she sees that Eliza got through to her son. And so it seemed like it's supposed to be, and there was an element of empowerment there, Tucker, as you're saying, in the confidence of Eliza. But then is it supposed to end with is it supposed to be like a cold ending of like, but you can't beat the patriarchy and you can try to be confident, but still you're gonna have to go get your husband his slippers? Or is it supposed to be a comedy thing where I'm supposed to like play a slide whistle and elbow my friend and go women when the movie ends? Like it's so unclear, and I think it's really a damaging ending.
I think it's probably
sorry,
because okay, you go.
Sorry, I was going to say.
And then let me get a word in. I want to speak about this ending.
I know. I would just say everyone should go by my headcanon ending that you can read in my Letterboxd
I subscribed
review.
to Tanner's Letterboxd review of this ending.
Tanner_Dykstra, follow me on Letterboxd if you have it. Which is, after the fade to black, Eliza just shoots Harrington in the back of, or Harrington in the back of the head. Higgins in the back of the head.
Yeah, I think that would have been like, that
That's
would
my
have been
headcanon ending.
Awesome girl boss moment that I would have loved to see. A great Julie Deucer now thing, I think. That would have really, really upped the ante.
Corno, but
whatever. It's French, I tried.
PWM moment.
But I digress.
PYM.
I think that the thing...
Let's even get a word in edgewise.
The end of the film is emblematic of the issues it has with its like central conceit. I think this film is quite sexist, and I think this film is like very classist in the way that it is in how it is constructed, and it never deals with that. And it, especially in terms of its sexism, it allows its characters to be sexist. There's a moment of where they're like, maybe it's a bad idea to hate women, and then like, nah, I'm fine. I got this beautiful woman right here coming after me. And so like, yeah, what is the film trying to say? Does the film really just say that, yeah, in this time period, late Victorian England, you could just totally get away with this kind of stuff? Like, is that and is it right that you should reform the way someone speaks to transform them into an entirely different person? I think these are things that the film like tries to explain, but it doesn't have. I don't think the political will in Hollywood was there in 1964 to deal with these issues. Ill-equipped politically to be like, yeah, these guys, like, we have to call out the injustices that we are fabricating in our own. They can't. They make up the aspects that are quite negative and then don't fix them, basically, even though the film has a happy ending.
The thing I think about the message of this film is that it really all comes down to not fully working because the ending doesn't tie it together. And it is left on an ambiguous note of like, oh, maybe she is going back to him. Oh, now, whose character arc does that like fulfill? None of them. But I do think that what the film does up until that point is surprisingly strong commentary on sexism and classism and patriarchy. Because as I was saying earlier, I do think that the comedic, parodic, is that a word? Parody-ish
Parodic,
tone.
right?
Parodic? Is that how you pronounce it? I have no idea.
Parody-like.
Parody-like.
Parody-wise.
It's a parody. Parody-wise. Cookie-wise, you know. Tone of this film does feel like they're critiquing it when they're making fun of him being sexist. It's cartoonish, it's overwhelming, it's ridiculous, and they recognize its ridiculousness as they're showing the high-class people are like soulless fucking robots when they're watching that race sequence, which, by the way, I think absolutely the highlight of the film.
Yeah.
But in these moments, you can tell that the film knows that the classism and the sexism and those themes are bad, and it is criticizing them through humor in a way that they couldn't explicitly in this time period. I think, maybe not, maybe I'm reading a little bit too much into that, but I do think it is strong in that, and especially as Eliza becomes empowered by the end, you're like, oh, okay, this is a female empowerment story. This is taking down this sexist man, this patriarchal system. But then I think the last few minutes is really what throws that into question. But up until that point, I do think it is pretty strong.
See, I didn't really know if I found it all that funny, though, while I was watching it. I found the situations to be very ridiculous, and to me being like laughing, being like, this is like super kind of overblown and like, haha, like this is crazy. But not really like finding myself like laughing at what the film is saying, but how the film is saying it. And so, like, for me, that analysis doesn't like read super well, because I feel like if the film is directing its like commentary through the humor, like I agree with your reading of the race scene. That makes a lot of sense. I was like, oh yeah, they're like the same. They all move in like robots. But I think that the overall like message about like literally like how you speak determines who you are is not really. There isn't commentary made on that, because ultimately she benefits a huge amount from it. She is immense. She's wealthy. She is super rich, primarily because she changed the way she spoke. And gonna say it, that's not how you should become super wealthy. You know?
Yeah.
Have you tried it?
Yeah, I tried it at the top of the episode, and you saw how that turned out.
That's true.
Christ.
That's a fair point.
I agree with Timo. I think that the film, in its absurdity, handles the sexism element of its thematics a little bit better. Although I still think that I agree with you, Tucker. I think that its work is completely undercut in the last couple minutes of the film. But I agree with Timo. I think that the class stuff is ridiculous in this movie. I think it's really ridiculous. Because what I assumed was going to happen was that in the character arc of Eliza Doolittle, our main character, I don't think we ever said her name in the review, is as when she finally, because there's basically a moment where a switch is flipped. It's like 3 a.m. It's like the Hampshire hurricanes, whatever. Mm-hmm. She finally nails it. No, it's the Spain rain and the Spain and the plains, whatever. It doesn't matter.
Yes.
The point is, there's a moment where this sort of drilling clicks. And my assumption, and while she does fall back into her quote-unquote lower English and a couple points after that, I thought that there's going to have to be some kind of reconciliation with her, with the fact that after the first couple scenes, she up and leaves her class position, all of her friends, her communities, all of it entirely in a negative light of, oh, I hear these old women like laughing and picking the beans. They live a terrible life. I get sad thinking about myself being there. I need to escape. And then the film is like, yep, you just got to move up, and that's the only way you can do anything with your life. And I found that to be really peculiar, because I wanted a scene where Eliza has to really wrestle with the fact internally that, yeah, okay, I have this new speech, I have this new status, but I've lost everything I used to have. but it doesn't really happen. And I think the dad is supposed to be that, but I think the stuff the dad is so intentionally written in a circuitous and witty way that I get so little out of his character. Other than the old ball and chain's gonna lock me down tomorrow. and so I find him not be a great source of that consciousness of leaving behind the past. There's this weird I'm burdened by my new sense of economic and social freedom, and I just find it to all be really poorly thought out and not really defended by the text of the film.
I think there's a hint that they could have gone with. I think there's a very possible way that the film could have gone down. That Eliza says on a couple occasions, once at the beginning and it's played back on the record player at the end of the film, that all she really wants to do is go work in the nice flower shop, but they won't hire her because she doesn't speak correctly. Mm-hmm. This is a great conflict. This is an amazing thing that you have set up, that you're like, okay, a character has wants, there's obstacles, like we're working in the themes that you've established. The film, I feel like, does it, in an entirely rewritten version of this film, that's an idea that you could go down and explore. Mm-hmm. But it's like, I was like, oh, the tiniest crumb of a hint was given to me of a thing that, like, I think that would have really worked. I mean, there's a lot of other factors depending on making an entirely new storyline work in a film. But I feel like like you said, Abram, the way that that it just doesn't even think about any of these aspects in her life, any of the class relations that she has. And when, like, as a character, she kind of just wants to go work in the nicer flower shop because maybe that what you want to do in life is work with flowers. That's cool. You could do that.
The last thing I would say before I stop monopolizing the class point is that, Timo, I think you raise an interesting thing that actually is hinted at elsewhere in the film, but again, not explored at all. This idea that it's Higgins and then what's his name? Perkins? Peckman? Wegmans? What's his name?
Pickering.
There we go.
Higgins, it's explicit. She goes, Higgins, you see me as a flower girl always. From the beginning, Pickering saw me as a lady, right? And so there was an opportunity, as you're saying, Timo, to explore the aspirations of Eliza and give her more autonomy towards the end of the film, and then have to deal with the fact that the larger society maybe still doesn't accept her because she came from this old position, or all of a sudden that's erased. Her old life is erased. And I think both then give us as a way as an audience to sort of interpret a message about what's happening here, but because, as you're saying, it's all so backgrounded and muddy, it means nothing to me.
I mean, yeah, you guys bring up great points. I didn't really consider the whole thing of, her, the whole setup of her, like, wanting to work at a nice flower shop, because that seems like it's a setup thing for her character arc to end on. And they just abandon it at some point. They just kind of like, oh, there it goes. Oops. I guess... it's really interesting that, because I always, I opened up this whole discussion saying, like, man, they really butcher Eliza's character arc at the end. But I didn't really, this discussion has sort of opened up the floodgates to me of, like, how badly and how, like, early on they even begin to butcher it. And yet completely abandoning some of her original goals and her wants and stuff like that. And they hamstring this character into the narrative. Freddie, who we see twice standing outside of her door being like, "Aw, gee whiz, I'd really like to date her." And then she's like, "I'm gonna date Freddie." Okay, great, awesome. It is interesting and illuminating to hear you guys talk about these things.
I will note, though, that I do believe Eliza, in key moments, has great autonomy and really is an active and chooses to take the paths that she takes in the film. Like, she chooses to go to Higgins and be like, I will pay you, whatever they say the percentage of the millionaire's salary is. I will pay you as much as I can to do this thing. She clearly wants it, but again, it just like, it doesn't, it lets her explore and take some character choices within fairly narrow boundaries.
Yeah, I think for me, the elements that are dropped are peculiar, and there are certainly roads that I wish it had gone down, and that certainly would have tied together all the thematic material. But when it all boils down to Eliza Doolittle, I do think that she actually does have quite a good set of compelling character moments when we're talking about her having autonomy in those moments. But even when, as Abram was alluding to a little bit, when she returned to the square from when she came, where she was originally selling the flowers, and she goes up to the people who used to be her friends or her community, and they no longer recognize her. And I think there's a really powerful scene there where she has an identity crisis, where she has moved quote unquote up in the world. She has nicer clothes, but she has lost her identity. She's lost where she's come from, and you can see the sadness on her face as she slowly walks away, realizing that they see her completely differently than she was before, even though internally she's the same person. So I do think there is an interesting commentary there, not only through her identity crisis, but about how outward perception affects the way that people look at you. And I think that's what the commentary of this entire film is going on. Of course, there's elements of sexism and classism there I think are pretty intrinsic to the plot, and that maybe I disagree and think it handles them a little bit better than you guys do, because I found this film a lot funnier than apparently the rest of you guys did. But I do think that core element of it is surprisingly well done, because that's what each of these scenes is leading to, is if you change a superficial element about yourself, you'll be perceived very differently from everyone. And maybe that'll make you lose some things, but give you different opportunities. And how do you wrestle with that? And I do think that is all really interesting. And all boils down to Eliza, who is, I think, a really incredible character in the way that she's especially portrayed in her physicality by, Audrey Hepburn. I can't believe her name almost slipped my mind. But the physicality of her performance, I think, makes this movie shine immensely. It's the small nods she does. It's the movement of her arms and her legs as she's performing these songs and these dance sequences, or even just reacting to the way that Higgins or the other people around her are like talking down to her. There's so much emotion in her performance that I'm able to gather what the character is thinking because of the skill of the actress portraying her.
Well, yeah, I'm not bemoaning the performance from Hepburn at all. She obviously does a fantastic job and should have gotten a nomination, despite the fact that she did not.
She didn't.
Yeah, I'll get into that with some trivia later. But I think what we're talking about is not, we're not bemoaning the humor or anything like that, because as I said, this is a very funny film and seems to be knowing what it's doing for a long time. But the issue is, in the script, seems to sort of fumble these conclusions that it's seeming like it's going to draw, but then retroactively you have to be like, wait, were these the conclusions that it was trying to draw the whole time? Or was I just assuming that because that makes the most sense writing-wise, that you would end these character arcs these certain ways, and these character moments would lead to this ending place for a character or something like that? I think that's really the issue that we're all talking about here, is a scripting issue, a character writing issue towards the end, a trajectory for these characters that seems to be, I don't know, basically not unwritten, not present. I don't really know what to assign there, but yeah, I think that is the main issue with that. And I'm sort of having an internal crisis, an identity crisis myself. Of like, should I be rethinking my score on how to assign this? Because all the elements that I still originally liked, Hepburn's performance, Harrison's performance as this unlikable character, they're all still there, of course, but yeah, I think they're recontextualized by the scripting issue. And of course there's the costume design, the production design, and everything that are fantastic in this, but I think it is at the bare bones the story that I got so much humor and enjoyment out of. I'm like, but what are the conclusion that it's drawing, and are they good ones that make sense with the character setups towards the beginning?
I will say that my issues with the film go beyond that.
Sure.
I don't like Audrey Hepburn's performance.
Really?
No, I don't.
First of all,
it's certainly subjective, but I find her whole screaming bit to be so grating.
Oh, I loved it. It was funny.
I would say intentionally so, and I think that's the self-awareness of the film, is like, oh yeah, like her voice is obnoxious intentionally so, her screaming in the situation is cartoony, exaggerated, and that's part of the charm of the world of the characters, I would say.
I mean, it certainly might be, but when it reaches a point that for me as an audience member, I no longer really care about your character, I think it's failed. Because ultimately, I think that her, like, intentionally ridiculous, larger-than-life accent she puts on that affect does succeed and does go to the point in the sort of themes you're talking about, Tucker. But when she's literally, like, screaming and crying as everything happens, I get the joke, but it becomes grating. And I think this film's humor and its as I alluded to, the musical numbers and the dialogue sequences, they just like turn the knife a time too many for me. Like it goes back to, I think,
you
the film
like
is
being
too
stabbed, but not turned that many times.
Yes. No. Yes, Tucker, you're 100% right. But I do think it speaks to the fact that, like, scream a couple less times, have a couple less verses on these songs, right?
Sure.
Because I'm with Timo. I don't think I laughed out loud at the movie one time. I think it's a witty film. I also don't typically connect to humor of this era and prior, as we've talked about in other reviews, but it's certainly witty, and I appreciate that. But again, I was not sold on the performance. I also was not sold on the 3 a.m. flip of now all of a sudden I can do the voice perfectly. It feels like we're all of a sudden we're about halfway through the film. We gotta switch tracks. We're gonna switch tracks there. It just didn't quite work for me here. Obviously this is not like Audrey Hepburn is like, you know what, I think would be awesome, let's do this. To me it reads like the script wants me to do this, so I'm going to, and she does it well. I do think she's charismatic, but again, I agree. I think it comes to how her character is written, how the entire structure of the narrative is written. So I was not as charmed, I think, as maybe you were, Tucker.
The one
it's clear.
thing, me and Audrey Hepburn, I just like watching Audrey Hepburn on film. She's great, and I just think she's like very magnetic personality on screen. But my like little bit is, during the musical sequences, I felt like she wasn't the most dynamic and most like movement-based character. We don't. I feel like a lot of these musical sequences did end up kind of boiling down to your characters standing or sitting, one standing, remaining motionless and then singing at each other, and then getting up, walking to another position, continuing to sing. And I just was like, we've seen musicals, even musicals from around this time. I'm thinking to American in Paris, that really move us around and really go like put that choreography into the musical, because it's song and dance. Like those are things that in my mind are linked in a movie musical. And I was wishing I had more dynamicism during the musical sequences where Audrey Hepburn could move. And because I think you're right, Tucker, that she is good at communicating these like subtle nuances in her performance when she's not dancing and singing. But when she is, it's weaker,
I think the reason that this film works so well for me and feels so distinct is that it's not that, and I think it does work quite well in its more static nature, in its more subtle performances. Because what this movie is entirely about, and I think this is not disagreeable you can't disagree with it in the slightest, is about linguistics. This is about language, it's about wordplay, and that is obviously in the literal text of the film, but also in where it puts its focus. Is these characters are a professor and a flower girl, and it's about the words and the language. So when you're in these song and dance sequences, it is, I think, so much more on the song because you're trying to pay attention to the wordplay. And as they're doing these subtle movements and like shaking their fists and doing small movements with the wordplay, I think that is really fun and kinetic on a really small level. It's like they're animated in their conversation ability, not in their dance ability. And I think that's maybe for me why I find this sort of conversational tone of the musical numbers a lot more memorable and compelling than many other dance sequences, because I feel like those can get a little bit visually cluttered. They can move around a little bit too much, where I'm focusing too much on the kinetic aspect of the dance and not on the wordplay that's talking about the characters and their moments and their emotions and feelings. And of course, those two can go in hand. I love Chicago. I love the New West Side Story. That the two aren't mutually exclusive. But I think this shows me that dance is not strictly necessary to have incredibly compelling musical sequences. I think the amount of musical sequences in the movie is, I think, maybe too much. Maybe it adds too much to the runtime of the film, but the consistent quality. There are so few musical sequences in the movie that are not memorable, that are not unique, that do not have entirely different stylings in their in what topic they're tackling or whose perspective they're coming from. There's so much in here that I think maybe that's where it becomes too much, but I have to just say, man, the musical aspect of the film, which I almost never praise, is top notch. Like some of my favorite of all time.
See, yeah. I found it interesting you said that because I was watching, like, I wonder why Tucker likes these musical sequences so much, because I personally am, certainly with Timo, I found a lot of them to be very flat. Because when they are more expressive, the two I think of are Eliza's first number when she's, with all of her friends in the flower patch and she's on like that big wagon at the end and they're tipping her back and forth, or when dumb hokey dad is here for one last night of fun before he gets married and he's dancing with everybody in the bar. I think what's interesting with these numbers is that they kind of like toe the line between these are just happening in the universe of the world, or they're like extrapolations away from it. I think there's a fun like middle ground here where we're actually engaging with elements that would be present in the world had we not been singing. And so I found that concept to be compelling, but just not taken far enough, because when we are just hanging around and singing or walking back and forth a little bit, it really does suck a lot of the energy out of the room for me. Because Tucker, I agree that the wordplay is strong, and it is strong enough to match it with more engaged choreography to really really knock those sequences home for me. But I also have one major issue with the numbers. Can Higgins not sing?
Well,
He absolutely can. He's a professional star. He was in the musical of this film as
Rex Harrison
Henry Higgins for 20 years before this.
Yes,
But-
but he talk sings, and that's a big
Right.
thing about this. He talk sings.
And I find it super distracting because other people aren't doing that. So it leads me as the viewer not knowing what you just told me, talking, to be like, can this guy not sing? Like, what's happening here? It doesn't feel right. It feels like there's like so many inconsistencies in how we're choreographing these scenes, how we're vocally directing them. I was not a big fan of musical numbers.
The reason I would say I disagree with that is because I do feel like it makes his character and his personality shine through in a very different way. It's like, okay, yeah, he's not singing outwardly like Eliza is, like Alfred is, or these other characters. No, he's rigid, he's doing small movements, and he's doing everything super staccato. And I think that makes his numbers feel much more personal to him. It's like, oh, this is his wordplay. He's using these big words because that's what his personality is like. And he's not moving his body or singing in flamboyant ways because that's not who Henry Higgins is as a character. And I think so having different stylings actually ends up working in making the characters significantly more distinct than most musicals otherwise have.
You know, I think I want to let Tanner give some trivia.
Okay. I do have some trivia. And Abram, it is interesting that you pegged to that he's doing it. He's doing his singing in a different way than most other people, because Sir Rex Harrison talked his way through the musical numbers. They were because of that, they were unable to pre-record them and have him lip sync. So a wireless microphone, one of the first that was ever developed.
I read
by the
about
way,
this. I read because this
Yeah.
is important. Wireless microphones, dude.
was rigged up and put right under his tie, and apparently they did it with like radio signals, so sometimes it would pick up like passing police cars and stuff like that.
Tanner, I hate to break it to you, we still do it with radio
Oh,
signals.
that actually makes a lot of sense. I don't know why I said they used to. However, he's doing this talk singing thing. They can't lip sync it. So this meant that his mouth and his words were completely in sync, and everyone else's looked off since they were lip syncing. The studio thought that this was too obvious, so they altered Harrison's soundtrack, lengthening and shortening notes in various places so that his synchronicity is slightly off like all the other actors and actresses. And apparently, I think Tucker mentioned the fact that he is not moving around a whole lot. Apparently, he had like leg pains because he was a guy in the 60s and he smoked a lot, and he had to stop smoking because he had leg pain so bad. So that's probably also a reason why he doesn't move around a whole lot.
Well, and wireless microphones.
He's also an older guy.
You really don't want wireless microphones moving around very much.
Yeah.
You want those close to stay put while you want to hear something through that. You know, one of Abram, you bring up my favorite musical sequence, even though I think it adds very little to the film, is old dads getting married the next day. I like that one particularly
it's fun.
in the way that camera is moving all around, and we visit a ton of locations with great those creative match cuts were really enjoyable to see, where you zoom into some women's hair and then you pan out and you're in a new shot, but you were zooming out from some people who were wearing hats that were the same color and shape as the hair in the shot beforehand. I think that's really, really creative. And when you carry the father out, he's going off to get married in the morning, and how do they lift him up and carry him away? It's like a literal funeral procession. And this is one moment where I was like, okay, I appreciate that this film is being very outward in what it is trying to say and being very obvious, because I get it. He's going. He is literally going to die when he gets married.
I hate my wife. I wish I was dead.
The thing I would say is that I do think that applies to most, if not all, of the musical sequences, which is why I love them so much and think they're so consistent. When you're talking about, which I really think we need to talk about this fucking race sequence, because when you show up at this ridiculous set with AstroTurf on the ground and everyone is wearing monotone costumes.
Gray, like grays and whites and
extremely extravagant monotone costumes, and they're talking like this about the race that they're so excited about. This is the most exciting thing I've ever experienced in my life, and they lift up their binoculars like this, and everything is just going. I think that is another example of where the film, like you were saying, is doing exactly what it needs to communicate the tone of the sequence, the ridiculousness of the sequence, and I would say that extends to other ones as well, like Alfred's first song, where he's talking about how much he hates doing work, and he's bouncing up and down through the trenches that they're digging, and
with a little bit of luck. Tucker, by the way, you left out the best part of the horse race sequence, which is what when they lift up the binoculars and the horses are right in front of them.
Right in front of them. Exactly, and it's
that got the biggest out loud laugh from me. Yeah,
it's so on the nose that I think it's really like just pointed in its parody commentary.
Yeah, I think I didn't quite get what was going on. That was early enough in the film that it didn't, or I guess I was midway through.
It's right before the intermission.
It's after mid. Yeah, I almost didn't get it because the rest of the film is not. That is such a clearly stylized sequence, and the rest of the film goes for this musical realism of London. I would say, where it's everything kind of looks realistic, and they're on the streets, and then we go to this racetrack set, and it looks like a set. It's got AstroTurf on the ground, and I didn't take it seriously at first. I was like,
oh, you shouldn't. That's intentional.
But
absolutely.
Not as I'm saying this is this is weird. I'm this is what we've gone from very high production values to something that I feel doesn't have very high production values, and it didn't register with me until way later. I was oh yeah, I guess that's kind of what was going on there. But a situation like that isn't really repeated, and isn't. It's just kind of a one-off. Even though there are other circumstances with people of the same class, the whatever the ball is, the big one at the end is a non-musical sequence. Is there even any singing and dancing in that? No, and it is staged realistically, completely unlike the horse race sequence.
Before we talk about the ball sequence, I agree with you completely, Timo. I picked up on none of this and feel like I missed nothing, to be honest with you, because let me draw a comparison to a much better film here for a second. So when I was watching Zack Snyder's Justice League...
Oh my God.
I knew it. I was just about to say, one of the classic Abram Buner compares a Best Picture winner to a Zack Snyder film.
So I'm watching Zack Snyder's Justice League here, and I get to the end of the film. We've just defeated Doomsday, great. And the camera comes back up, and suddenly we're in Zack Snyder's green screen backyard.
Yep.
And we're in...
not in that movie.
Oh, sorry. They all weren't together.
Steppenwolf, excuse you.
Who gives a shit?
I can't believe I just uttered that word on a question for the Bestest episode.
we're in Zack Snyder's green screen backyard, and all of a sudden we're doing the Injustice timeline. And and it's shot completely differently. The tenor of the production is completely different. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on here? Joker's asking for a hand job from Batman. It doesn't make any sense. And in the context of the scene, there's a real... and agree to disagree at this point. There's a real artistic vision there from Zack Snyder, but it's at odds with the rest of the film. And I felt very similarly about this racetrack sequence, because frankly, when we come up on the racetracks, I was like, wait, is this the intermission part? But it wasn't. It was just another sequence of the film. So I agree with Timo that it felt like we just took this thing that I agree is very distinct, very interesting, and just slotted it into a place where my audience expectations, the context of its placement, led to me being like,
The one thing I would say about that is, and I don't know if you'll disagree with this or not, but I think that's so obviously intentional that it makes sense. Is this sequence is unlike the other high-class sequences in the movie, so obviously about the artificiality of small talk and of the high class, that everything is rigid, they're moving like robots, and it does shift away from that when Eliza is introduced, and they go back to talking and singing and moving in normal ways, and they're talking to her like it's normal. It's about that first sequence where everything is about the artificiality that makes that so distinct and works so well for its commentary on class.
I mean, I suppose so, but why isn't the rest of the film like that then?
Because Higgins is not like the rest of the artificial high class people. They actually don't like him. He's sort of an offshoot of this, where he sort of exists in his own bubble.
He's an incel.
He actually is. There's multiple songs on that account.
Yeah,
But
I don't.
Tucker, you
I
have a
get what
great
you're
point.
saying.
You have a great point, Tucker.
I agree. Your reading makes sense. I think a lot, Tucker. I don't know. I'm just like that sequence. It doesn't like click for me really. There's something something is off about it in the way that it situates itself within the rest of the film. Even though I think you're right about what it is saying about class. I'm just like maybe there's a more fluid way to do it. I'm not sure.
I want to talk about Audrey Hepburn a bit more because I feel like we only really addressed her and her performance in these generalities about she does these things well, because I think she does a very good job in the areas of the film where she's allowed to shine through, where her comedic timing is allowed to shine through, and it ties into what we were just talking about with the racetrack sequence, because that's like her first public debut as the titular fair lady, and the way that she delivers these lines that are still like her Cockney dialect, but with the proper British way of speaking, are so good.
Oh my God, so funny.
And she's playing it so straight off of these other people who are also playing it straight. You have all these straight men, like literally and figuratively, in this scene. And that's difficult to pull off comedically, and Hepburn doesn't, and everybody else in the scene does it, but Hepburn is obviously the centerpiece of that scene, where she's like talking about her
grandma dying of a disease, and her dad pouring the gin down her grandma's throat as she's dying.
Yes.
What the fuck is she saying? It's so funny. Oh my God.
And it brings up her the way she says these things is there's almost like a physical image of your mind of like the Cockney dialect underneath, and then there's just this thin veneer of like she knows how to say the words, but she doesn't know the words to say to fit in here. I think she does that fantastically. If we want to talk about the actual dramatic side of her acting, I think we have to go to the confrontation between her and Higgins after they get back from the big fancy ball at the end, where she basically, it comes after the number "You Did It," where she's just sort of like
so funny.
where she's standing in the background, and it's funny, yes, because there's this awkwardness, but it's also deeply sad as you see her standing back there, just basically a statue amongst all these guys, being like, "Hey, buddy boy, we did it, huh? We turned this piece of trailer gutter trash into a real lady, didn't we? Up top, high fives, good job all around. Well, let's kick her out of the house." And she's like, what the hell are you guys doing? This is an awful way to treat people. But it comes across in this very human way, where she's talking about it in this roundabout ways, where she comes off very natural, because when you would be having an argument like this, you wouldn't come right out and say the exact thing. Like, all these little snipes and things come out first, and that's what the other person thinks that the argument is about. And it's really interesting, and she pulls it off very, very well. And it is criminal, I might add, that she wasn't even nominated for best main lead actress. Excuse me.
Jesus, especially so because of the notorious thing about this movie. The My Fair Lady stage musical was the main star who played Eliza Doolittle was Julie Andrews, who they replaced with Audrey Hepburn for this movie. And then Julie Andrews, because of that, got a chance to do Mary Poppins and won Best Lead Actress this year. So there's a whole kit and caboodle going around there.
Yes.
It's such an interesting story.
Tanner, I do have some trivia on Audrey Hepburn, but I want to throw it over to you guys first.
Well, I was just going to say, you've scintillated us with a little bit of nominations, but maybe perhaps you could give us the wins and noms a little bit,
I suppose I can give you the wins and noms.
Can I have a little, please? Can I have some wins and noms?
You may have a whittle wins and noms, Timo. So obviously this film won Best Picture. Rex Harrison won Best Actor in a Leading Role, and he thanked two fair ladies in his life when he accepted the award: Julie Andrews and Audrey Hepburn. When he was up there. George Cukor won Best Director. The film won Best Color Cinematography, Best Set Decoration, Best Costume Design, Best Sound, and Best Score. Yeah, and it was nominated for Best Actor in a Supporting Role for Stanley Holloway. I presume that is Eliza's father. Oh yeah, okay. Yeah.
Totally deserved.
Best Actress in a Supporting Role, Gladys Cooper. Tucker, which character was Gladys? Was that probably the
she mother?
maid
This
or
is
whatever?
whatever the fuck, yeah.
Miss Pierce, maybe?
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
No.
Yeah, maybe.
Which
maybe.
that's a weird nomination. But
Best adapted screen. It was nominated for best adapted screenplay and best editing.
yeah, I think all totally deserve it. And the one thing I do want to say, I think we have to wrap this up, so we can't go much longer. But is that the restoration of this movie is insanely good. When you see people coming down the stairs in this opening scene, like this could be shot today. The sound and the video quality are so insanely well restored. I don't think I've ever been as impressed with a restoration as I was this.
Yeah, I mean, even on Netflix, which looks pretty garbage most of the time, I think it looks quite good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it doesn't help that it does help quite a bit that the cinematography is it's great. The camera it moves
fantastic.
around, and there's a lot of, best cinematography goes to the film with the most color. So
Best color cinematography. Color cinematography.
yeah, yeah.
Most color cinematography.
June doesn't have a lot of color.
It's all yellow.
It's a great point.
I
But what
do
about
have
the eyes of
to.
the Fremen?
I feel like I need to address, if we can get back on track here. I feel like I need to address the other big drama about this film, which is Audrey Hepburn's being dubbed over. She's dubbed over by Marty Nixon. Not completely, though. That is a common misconception about this film. Audrey Hepburn's voice, apparently the reasoning for this was something about, let's see, she was not, the music itself for the musical was not transposed down to accommodate Hepburn's low mezzo voice. That's how the lady who dubbed her put it. But Hepburn did sing most of Just You Wait, as well as the reprise of the song, showcasing her ability to sing perfectly at ease with things that are at a lower register. She also sang a couple other choice lines, like in sleep, like the line "Sleep, sleep, I couldn't sleep tonight" from "I Could Have Danced All Night." But yeah, apparently Audrey Hepburn did not know that she was going to be dubbed over. They did it in secret. When she learned about this, she apparently stormed off set. But she kept it classy. She came back the next day and apologized for her wicked behavior. You don't have to apologize, Audrey. That's fucked. That's fucked that they did that.
So Tanner, are you telling me that the movie, which is about changing your voice to make it fit the situation that you want to go, had to change the voice of the main actress because they didn't like it?
Isn't it? Quaint, isn't it?
Life imitates art, or the other way around?
Yeah. And apparently Audrey Hepburn said that she would never make a musical again unless she could do singing on her own.
Good
stipulation.
Yeah, completely fair. I mean, I just have some assorted favorite little jokey things or whatever, but we can skim over those if we need to get to scoring.
Let's get on this. Abram, what do you say? Do you want to speak or go to scoring?
I've been mostly negative, and I think my score is going to reflect that because as I've been talking, I was like, yeah, maybe I really did not like this movie, actually. Maybe when I said at the beginning I liked parts of it, I actually meant that I liked one part of it in particular. That's when she swallows a marble, and then Higgins goes, oh, that's okay, I have more marbles.
Yeah.
I just think that's a really good joke.
Yeah. Oh, boy.
All right, let's give it a score. Let's pull it up.
Let's do it.
And see.
This is a real crisis that I'm having right
where
here.
My Fair Lady goes. Where does it go? I know where it goes.
I've got a score, but I don't have the spreadsheet open, so.
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna narrate a little bit. My inner monologue is what's going on here.
Because you are the one. Can you even sing it for us? Maybe
Excuse
me.
me.
Don't make him do that.
Oh no, I'm not going to do that. But what I was going to say was, I had this film at a higher score initially, and over the course of our conversation, it's been lowered and raised up again. So I think I'm going to err on the side of positivity here. I think that's what I'm gonna go with, because I think or am I gonna remember the fact that they really just fumble these characters?
We don't have time for this.
I'm gonna err on the side. I'm gonna err on the side of positivity. I got
err
my
on the
number
side of putting the number in.
I
shit what it is.
Go. Press the buttons. Ding, 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 ding. Okay, there we go. Wow, what a spread. The average score is, we have a 1 second. We're figuring out the average score. Mr. Computer is calculating.
It's right there.
It's 6.8. 6.8, so pretty high for for a film that we were pretty hard on throughout most of the review. The point breakdown is 8.7, which is what Tucker gave it. Tanner gave it a 7.1. So, Eric, were you deciding between 7.0 and 7.1?
I was waffling between a 6 or in the 6s or in the 7s is what I was waffling between. Yeah.
I gave it a 6 and Abram gave it a 5.2. So pretty big spread, and the computer has decided that is going to be 6.8. Not the computer. Math has decided that that's how averages work.
The computer
true.
just picks a number every time.
Yeah, randomly.
So that is actually very interesting because it is going to go right below a different musical, one that we actually already referenced. American in Paris sits at 6.9. And so this is going to sit right below it at the 49th spot on our list.
Damn.
Well, you can't win them all, Tucker.
No.
Truly.
Tucker, where is it on your list?
What? What do you
Where
mean?
is it on your list?
On my
Your
personal list?
Yeah.
Oh, like number 13 or something like that.
Yeah, I was just curious how big of a disparity that is.
In retrospect, I think my score for An American in Paris is a little too high based on how much I remember about that film. But hey, we digress. It's in the moment. What are you gonna do?
That's what we've put ourselves into this position. It happens every week.
Yes, exactly.
Yep. Okay, well, do we have anything else we want to speak about this film, or should we just spin that wheel?
Let's give it a old spin-a-rooney. How's abouts?
How's about let's give it a spinzaroonie?
You guys will have to beat that way of speaking out of me as well. Or whatever they do in this movie, I don't know.
You're getting the belt later, Tanner.
Yeah, oh god, yeah. I don't know why I said that, but I did. Woo. Let's end the episode, huh? Wheel, what's your deal? Give us a movie that makes us squeal. Is it on digital? Is it on real? Wheel, what's your deal?
And the wheel's deal is number 1 again.
We are getting lots of ones, huh?
Yeah, we are. The wheel is just really deciding that it's wanting to just go back in
We're eliminating these
semi-sequential
modern
order.
films.
What film is our most recent film that we haven't talked about, Tucker?
We've knocked off the entirety of the 2010s in terms of doing our
From
reviews.
that?
So we're going to be talking about the 20. Oh, I guess this is specifically the 2010 Best Picture winner, which is a controversial one to say the least, and I'm very interested to hear our thoughts on it as we give it a close modern analysis. But directed by Tom Hooper and starring Colin Firth, Helena Bonham Carter, Guy Pearce, and Jeffrey Rush, we're going to be watching The King's Speech.
We're going back right across the pond again.
No, I guess we're not leaving the pond. We're staying in England.
No, we traverse back to America every time to do quests. And then we're going
That's
back.
a great point.
Back to
We have to fly to the location where the film was recorded.
Yes, the Quest for the Bestest is an American-made podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Made in the USA, of course. What do they call? What is it? Blimey London? What's the word that the adjective that is ascribed to London?
I'll learn when I
Governor.
go there sometime soon.
Governor. Thank you. We're going back to Governor London.
Okay, well, I think this is it. We did it, boys. We talked about My Fair Lady. I personally feel that this is obviously significantly too low of a placement for it. I do think that what this movie does best, it knows it does best, and it puts that for the majority of its runtime. I think the humor of this movie is fantastic. Its wit, its characters, its charm. It's some of the best lyrical dialogue I've ever heard in my life. Phenomenal set design, phenomenal costumes, great cinematography. Like I think this movie hits on so many marks that I frankly find it a little bit disappointing that we had to focus on the negatives for so much of it because I wasn't able to espouse all of the things that I loved so much. But thus is the way of the quest, and I just want to end it on that powerful note because this is one of the best Picture winners.
Oh. Well, Tucker, you'll just have to grit and bear it, much like Eliza Doolittle.
This has been a Quest BLBS crossover episode. I think.
has.
In,
We're a little-
in,
we're a
in
little-
spirit and tenor.
Yeah.
We're a little all over the shop in this episode, but I like it. We're a little loose, we're a little
Flower shop.
goofy. We're a little all over the flower shop. Unlike Eliza Doolittle, who did not get to go to a flower shop.
So maybe we are like Eliza Doolittle.
Oh, I see.
All right, my fair ladies, I think it's time we got to wrap this episode up. We will see you next time for The King's Speech. Looking forward to watching this one because it kind of reminds me of that Churchill movie that was going to win a couple of years ago.
Darkest Hour.
Yeah, it reminds me of that for some reason. I've seen neither.
British.
And we're going to find out what King's Speech is about next week. And we
This
will
reminds
be
me of
here.
Snatch.
End of the episode. End it.
We'll be here to talk about it on the Quest for the Bestest. Thank you all for joining me, and we'll see you next time. Peace.